and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. We are here with an incredible an incredible individual, someone who cares deeply about wellness and cares about the world, and is an exciting and fun person to talk to. Recently started up Lionheart Wellness, which we're going to learn about a little bit. But before I go any further, perhaps I should just give you the microphone, Mr. Cole Butler, and allow you to say anything else that I may have left out there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, George. Super exciting. Oh gosh, yeah, I'm figuring myself out in a lot of ways in real time, and Lionheart Wellness is part of that. And I have some ideas, but I'm also down to figure that out in real time right now. Um, so yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. So, as someone who has a background in clinical trials, and as someone who I believe has an incredible grasp of the English language, and let me explain to people what I mean by that. For those of you who may not know, Cole Butler is somewhat of a poet, and not just the poet that like George Monty. He's not like a cat in the hat poet. He's like a poet that has written some really beautiful poems that are used in integration. And you don't by chance have one of those poems close to you, do you, Cole?
I can pull it up pretty quickly here.
Okay.
There are a lot
How
of them are on my website, so.
okay. And what is your website? Just throw it out there as you're looking it up, maybe.
Yeah, lionheartwellness.net. And if you go
Okay.
to lionheartwellness.net/poetry, I have about 6 poems up there. I've probably written like 100 poems. I've lost count now. Sometimes I write them on the back of receipts and leave them for waiters and waitresses. Um, and they get lost in the ether, which I kind of enjoy. But I have a lot of poems. Gosh, I need to publish more of them. I always said once I have 100 poems, I'll just publish them all, throw them in a book. But I'm realizing they have such different like themes that it's hard to like have a common thread, kind of.
Mm.
So some of these ones that I had published online through PRATI, Ketamine Training Institute that I've worked with. They were all like kind of ketamine specific, either written while I was holding space for a ketamine session, integrating my own ketamine sessions, preparing to go into, I think, an LSD session with one of them. That may or may not be on the website here, but yeah, but I can read one. I got it pulled up here.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll just read Silk Scarf here. Floating down an unknown road, heading to my eternal home. Quiet leaves patter upon wood floors, opening us up to nature's doors. Bluebirds call in from window sills. You can hear them when you sit still. A held hand cures all wrongs and writes upon life nature's song. Rocking chair on the front porch, grilling in the backyard with a tiki torch. Music floats about in sacred space. Call me to be awake. Crying out for gentle kindness, we all need a little lightness. Unburden me of all my woes and make sacred things to be known. There you have
I
it.
love it. It's beautiful. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you.
So I guess I'll start on the surface of this idea that I want to mine a little bit deeper, but
Okay.
how is that particular poem? What was the inspiration for that poem? Was that something that we were holding space for, or can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think I wrote this one while I was holding ketamine space. So, when I do a group session, especially sometimes in individual sessions, I'll kind of just be sitting there, and it seems like a really kind of ripe environment for writing poetry because you're kind of just quiet, really peaceful, really tapped in tune. So I find it a good place to start writing. So yeah, so a lot of the times I'll just start going and I'll just kind of see what comes up. My process is very fluid. I try to just really be present and kind of let it unfold in front of me. A lot of the times I get into elements of like sacredness or the divine or the unknown or kind of the mysterious, kind of trying to ride that line between, the material world and the unknown world and get some of those elements. And then I also just like sensation, so grilling in the backyard with a tiki torch is kind of, I guess, an homage to my home and just growing up in the South and this kind of, embodied vibe of just being outside at night, smelling the air of the thing. And the tiki torches are always there to like get bugs away, but they're so luminous. So I like to incorporate a lot of those elements of sensation, of feelings, of smells, things like that. Yeah.
So it blows my mind to think that the inspiration that comes from sometimes being in, or sometimes just as likely being around, like a psychedelic situation. And I would argue that being at home on a rocking chair in a place you grew up with, surrounded by those memories and loved ones and even tragedies, and contemplating is in itself a psychedelic experience, and it's that space. And this, Mr. Cole Butler, is what is beginning to blow my mind. Like when I listen to the language of poetry, especially when I couple that with the way in which you were inspired, it reminds me a lot of Carl Jung. And he talked about different interpretations of these said states. He called them fantasies, but I really think that you could just replace fantasy with psychedelic experience, especially since a lot of people say the Red Book was Carl Jung having psychedelic experiences. But in the Red Book, he talks about we have an objective level in which we interpret what happens. I look at that as the science, as the clinical part, the objective part. And then we have the subjective level, which may be the integration, where you're talking to people and they're talking about their feelings. But what I want to bring to the forefront and spotlight is that maybe what people aren't talking about, and you've just demonstrated, is the interpretation at a collective level. Is it possible that the inspiration for some of these poems, when you are next to these people in psychedelic states, when you yourself are in a psychedelic state, it seems that you explain the inspiration for these poems was in these states? Maybe you're tapping into like the collective unconscious there, and that would parallel exactly with what Carl Jung was talking about. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, you sparked my mind in so many different directions. Man, Carl Jung's been one of my biggest influences. And so I think about, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, the objective, the subjective, kind of the material world, the non-material world. Yeah, and I've always been fascinated by, the unknown, the mysterious world. I've also spent a lot of time and energy in these careers that are all, scientific, objective, very pen and paper. And I just, I don't know, it's interesting. I don't see those two worlds as incompatible at all. And I just read a study this morning, or at least an article about a study that was saying that a lot of the times atheists think that Christians think that science is incompatible, and Christians think that, science is totally compatible with Christianity. And, I've always found the spiritual side, the scientific side to be compatible. And in a lot of ways, like tapping into this poetry, like having this really subjective relationship and artistic expression kind of balances me out in a lot of ways. I've never sought to like really be like a poet, quote unquote, like a career poet. I don't like sit down at my laptop and write. I only write when I get inspired, when I'm in that space. Like I said, it's very ripe for writing, if it's post psychedelic, pre psychedelic, or even just in life. like I said, sometimes I'm sitting down at a restaurant and I'll get like an experience from my waiter or waitress. And a lot of people don't pay much attention to that. They kind of tune out of it. It's just something that's going on around them, just the way their food gets to them. But I was a waiter for 3 or 4 years of my life, and I know how much of a life that is, and how much it means when you get like a little something special from somebody. And the last restaurant I worked at before I got a big fancy psychedelic, or not psychedelic, but research coordinator job. My first day waiting tables, after like 3 weeks of shadowing and training, somebody left me a golden dollar on my first table. There's a beautiful little golden dollar, and I thought it was so cool and so nifty. And anyway, so sometimes I'll be sitting down and the server will have a certain vibe, the restaurant will have a certain vibe, and I'll just write a poem like using their name, for example, or using like their style or their attitude. And so, yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think that's tapping into the collective unconscious space around me and saying like, oh, I'm picking up on like what you are, who you are, identifying that, turning it into a little piece of art. And then what I really like to do is just leave it. I don't sign my name usually, maybe my initials sometimes, but I'll just leave it, usually a 4 or 5 line poem, just real short, 12 to 15 words. Just leave it for them. And it's like, that's like a flower. Flowers are beautiful because they're temporary and they disappear. That's just written on a piece of receipt paper, but it's just a fun way for me to like tap into something else. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. In some ways, it's like its own language. It's like the language. Like I look at that as a language in a way. Like if you can see someone's manner, if you can see someone's experience in the, like you had made the point that you are aware of what it feels like to be what they're doing. And I think that experience is a kind of language. And I think that translates into almost everything we do, whether you're holding space for someone in a clinical trial and you've had that experience, or whether you're sitting at a table waiting for someone to bring you some awesome food, or whether you're having a conversation with someone you admire. It's this language of experience that no one really talks about. And it's almost like we can't measure it, but you can subjectively measure it because you can see how it makes the other person feel. But I can describe it, but it seems like there's no real words to explain it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's a stark contrast to, what is your rating on this scale? How, severe is your anxiety? Are you feeling tightness in your chest, etc.? It's just, it's just a tapping in. And it's not, like I could sit there and take my receipt paper and my pen out of my pocket and I could write, you're wearing black clothes, you brought me a biscuit, but that just wouldn't have the magic. And something about, just kind of tapping into this presence of experience and letting these poems unfold taps into, some of that other world for me, some of the more subtle in between factors. I'm thinking I have another poem.
Yeah.
I wonder, I might have read this one the last time I was on. I don't remember, but it doesn't matter.
Please.
Okay, so I just wanted to do this one because it also gives kind of a different perspective, because this was something I wrote right after I had a very powerful ketamine experience. I think I went home and wrote it. So this one's called Harmony. I want to swim among the stars, bask in the moonlight with a mason jar. I want to erase my schedule and hop on a plane to Mexico. I want to sniff the cool morning air and kiss a child on their hair. There's no need for worry in the moonlight, just essential air with its sweet delight. Artificial worries dissipate with gratitude, old fear replaced by the new. Love and light return abreast, springtime brought its Sunday best. So yeah, that one was like when I'm still in the headspace, you know, coming out of it. And gosh, I have one more at the ready here.
Yeah, please.
And this one, kind of trying to give all sides of the psychedelic poetry, I guess. This one was preparing, or kind of right before taking LSD with my partner. And that session, like beforehand, there was a lot of nerves and anxiety. In that session, ultimately led her and I both to decide to have a child together. And now we have a daughter on the way. So
Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, so this one's called Departure. A gas gripping of a faint image, paintings of undone remissions. Deep inside the unconscious mind, fairies play the strings of time. Beauty unfolds her weathered wings, showing us all of nature's things. A secret gem to be unlocked, the flowering feather of a peacock. We will find things once not known as we journey to the earth's core alone. Fear is no longer necessary. For each other we will carry.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just trying to paint this image of, tapping into like what's the beforehand, so that poem being Departure, it was like my anxiety, my nerves, getting ready to have this big, psychedelic experience. And then Harmony, is like being in that kind of blissful afterglow state of ketamine and kind of going home. And I was sitting on my back porch, looking up at the sky, feeling the cool air and just kind of writing. So yeah, I think, there's a lot of different spaces to tap into that energy and a lot of ways to tap into that energy. And I encourage, a lot of people to tap into that, even if you don't think it's bad, or even if you don't think it's good, even if you don't think it rhymes. It doesn't need to rhyme. My first time I sat down and wrote a poem, I just needed to get out like a feeling that I had. And it didn't rhyme at all. It was just like the power of the words and putting together in a certain way that conveyed passion and emotion. So I always I want other people to do it too. It doesn't have to be anything, special or profound. I think the worst poetry is when people are trying to be profound. I try not to be, but I can be very critical and just, when somebody's trying to sound deep, a lot of the times it's no, just let it go from whatever's coming up. And then I think that's the most beautiful, not being afraid of being judged for it or feeling comfortable in that uncomfortable space and able to just write.
Yeah, I think that is well said. It's almost like a dance between your emotions that you hold and your ideas in your hand, and trying to translate that onto a piece of paper. It has emotion and power, and for anybody that wants to write poetry, I'm sure, or even a journal for that matter. I mean, some of the things that you write down are the most powerful insights that you haven't found a way to verbalize yet. And so maybe it comes out raw, or it comes out what you might think is wrong, but you don't have to share. If you don't want to share something, it would be good for you to reflect on later, especially in a state that's highly charged, I think. Would that be good advice for people?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned when we started, trying to kind of figure out who I am right now, trying to figure out, what Line Art Wellness is. It's kind of my brand, my company. It's small. It's not even a company really, more just a small business side project. But, one of the things I've been thinking about on this recent LSD experience, the one that I wrote that poem before, I just had this moment of just like overwhelming just ideas, just being inundated with ideas, and I couldn't handle it. It was like so much information, and I just realized, that I have these thoughts and that I need to get them down. And so through podcasting, through writing, which we're doing now, which is awesome. It's just like I need to like get my ideas out there. Like I don't know who I am. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in this place of kind of having to sit almost in like poetry space and just kind of like let life unfold, which is scary for me because I'm not wired for that unknown all the time. I do a lot better when things are clear and in front of me. But anyway, what I'm saying is that I've just started to kind of be like, I just need to write. Like nobody has to read it. Like it doesn't have to be for anybody else. I don't have to have an agenda. I just open the notes app on my laptop and I just start. I did that, a couple days ago, and I'm just trying to like realize that through the process of just writing that I'm letting it unfold naturally, that I'm figuring it out, and that's what I'm saying. I'm figuring out, who I am, what I'm doing in real time right now without putting these projections out there or these roles or these labels or I do this, so I'm this. But just kind of, like letting that unfold. And, a lot of the times it's just being able to sit down and just write and like let whatever comes up come up. And I think that's a super valuable tool. It's been well researched to be super valuable. Just writing, sort of automatic or whatever, just journaling. I'm not that good about it sometimes. I don't have a good habit. I try to get in habits of it, but sometimes I just like I need to organize my thoughts. I'll get this journal out and I'll just start typing, I'll start writing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's something magic about verbalizing your ideas. And, I know for me, like sometimes I'll sit down and I'll write or I'll do a podcast and then I'll just be cleaning stuff up like 3 months later or 4 months later, and I'll be editing or I'll be looking back at my notes and I'll be like, oh, that makes total sense. You know what? That thing I did 3 months ago is gonna fit perfect into what I'm talking to Cole about tomorrow. Like, and it's just this weird way of it's almost like when you're writing things out, you're drawing a map into the future, even though you don't know where you're going until you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That it's not a coincidence. Like I was already beginning to feel that way. And I can look back at this note and see the beginnings of it right there. And I think it's having the courage to do it. And because sometimes it's scary or it's silly, or for me, there's times when I get down on myself and I'm like, what am I doing? It's so dumb, but we're our own worst critic. And I think it helps people to understand that if you ever feel that way, congratulations, so does everybody else. And it's not that you feel that way. It's like, okay, you feel that way, and now what are you going to do about it? So I
Right.
think that there's a lot there. And when you spoke about it, I'm wondering, do you ever look back on some of your poems or some of your notes and think to yourself, like, wow, that idea has been with me for a long time and I'm making it happen?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the times it's pulling strings together, strings of ideas or like you said, out of the collective unconscious, out of my own unconscious mind, kind of tying things together that have always been there. Um, or kind of, yeah, like you were saying, like kind of going back and looking at it. Like I wrote something for my daughter on the way. I think we're 17 or 18 weeks in.
That's awesome.
Um, and it wasn't even intended to be a poem. It didn't rhyme at first. It was just what I wanted for her, the life that I want for her. and I just needed to get it down. And then towards the end, it was kind of wavy. It was just this and this and this, and then towards the end, it started to rhyme just naturally. And then I was talking to my partner and just kind of talking about where I'm at in life, and I realized that I needed to read her this poem, and as I read it, I was just trying to hold myself back from just bawling in tears. I was crying. I was just like hard to get the words out. I was choking up. It's just like the only way I'm going to read this is if I'm like not completely bawling. But by the time it was over, I was just a mess. And it was just kind of realizing, that like I wanted these things for my daughter, that like having a daughter like keeps me present, like slows me down through all of my own anxieties and BS, and that, Yep. I want to be there for her and give her this life. So, I wrote this thing kind of in just a somewhat normal headspace, and then when I read it, it was like so powerful, and it tore me up. So yeah, I guess kind of in time, it works both ways, as you were saying, kind of going back later and being like, oh, I wrote this thing for this. Like even journaling the other day, I was talking about kind of just the process of writing and just get started and just let it flow and unfold. And here we are today talking about that. You know what I mean? So it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. As we're having an awesome conversation, like it's so weird to me to see like the fractal nature of it. And what I mean by fractal is that, in the beginning, we talk about, you'd spoken to me about Lionheart Wellness and how it's being birthed right now. Like you have this idea and you've yet to give it a label. You've yet to limit it with a label because it has the potential for eternal growth. And this is this new form of you. And simultaneously, you have this new daughter being born. At the same time, this new idea of your life is being born. And at the same time, it seems like the world we're going through is being reborn. You know what I mean? So like, as you're telling me this story, like I can see these same cycles of birth happening in people that I care about. And it blows my mind to see just these 1, 2, 3 cycles of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that the name Lionheart Wellness came to me in the middle of the night. Like one night, randomly, I was asleep. I like woke up just like with that in my head, and I'm like, I need to write that down because I'm gonna forget it. It was like 3 a.m. I woke up the next morning. I'm like, Lionheart Wellness, like that's pretty good. And there's a couple other businesses out there that use the name, I'll be honest, but I was like, it's too good. Like I need to use it. And so anyway, I looked into the laws and I'm good. I read it. I paid $1 to register the trade name in Colorado. Anyway, I saw it when I created it as like an umbrella, I guess, to encapsulate, everything that I do. And so, my podcast appearances are on the website. Some of my poems are on the website. Hopefully I can add more. I do coaching through there. I do consulting. I haven't had much of that in the past couple of months. I do free phone calls. It's also just a way to have a brand, have something that I can unfold under, like we're able to talk about it here on this podcast. I don't have to say exactly what it is, it's just a thing, and it gives it a name and it gives it kind of life to grow through. And people are like, hey, send me a link so I can refer people here. And so I say, yeah, go to my website. And anyway, so yeah, it's unfolding in real time. I've been trying to process what all that means. I've been trying to live in the uncertainty with the baby on the way. another major thing in my life is not getting into a PhD program when I put 6 years of work and concerted effort as like my singular goal, and then realizing like because I have this daughter on the way, because like I need to stay here in Fort Collins, like Colorado, and I want to stay here. I'm not going to be able to, jump and move across country and do a PhD, like just wherever the research takes me. And I didn't get into the local university, so that's not happening. Um, and I've always latched on to the PhD as like my identity, as my goal, as the thing I'm pursuing. I decided to prioritize, my relationship and the family life, and that's been incredibly rewarding. But, it leaves this big question mark of, who am I? Like, what am I doing? What's my identity? I don't have this thing to like always look towards saying I'm Cole Butler PhD. Like, it's just, I'm just Cole, and what does that mean? And my brain tries to fill in the gaps of like, well, I could do this, well, I could do this, well, I could do this. And I opened this Eckhart Tolle book the other day, um, which I've read before, and it was just full of gems. I was flipping through it, and I dog-eared a bunch of pages, and I got to this page, and it was just this little passage that said like, you can't identify with these roles. Like, just because you fill one role, as soon as you give yourself that label and say I am that, you take yourself away from that natural process of unfolding, of just being yourself, of being who you are, like figuring it out, just that beauty, that beauty that comes from being in the present moment. When I'm writing poetry, just like I try to just tune out. I try not to be analytical. I try not to overthink it. It's just like, just be really present and what comes to me, like what are the words that just appear almost in my mind. So I'm trying to like live in that space. I've also had my brain scanned with like a quantitative EEG machine, and I've been told that I have a brain pattern that's like wired specifically to want order, to want things to be there. I do really poorly when things are chaotic, when there's no planning. So I'm like wired to want to put things together. I think that's, why I'm in the role I'm in professionally, why I coordinate clinical trials. I can look at all the details, I can put all the pieces together, but it's never been enough for me to just have just like my organizing, like I need creative expression, I need creative outlet, I need to live in the moment, I need to let my life unfold. And it's hard not to just like be out here in the future, but to let it unfold naturally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I think it gets us back to the idea of the dance. Maybe it seems to me some of the people that I admire most are people that have decided to make their own way when they came to the fork in the road. Like, you can take the road that is paved, the golden path, and that leads to the world of published papers and PhDs and boardrooms, or you can take the road less traveled that you don't really know where it goes. But the word on the street is there's some beautiful scenery that most people have never seen in their lives. And like, I think that is the road that it reminds me of this Arthurian myth about King Arthur and Percival, and these people are sitting. I'm totally butchering it, but I'll just kind of
You're
paraphrase.
good.
And
For
so
it. Yeah.
they're sitting up at this round table, and they're preparing for a feast, and the knights of the round table are talking, and King Arthur stands up and he says, I feel as if we are in the presence of a miracle about to happen. And as he says that, like, this golden image of the grail appears onto the table, and it's just like, oh, and everyone's just like, whoa. And it's just for a second, and it's just this image of the holy grail. And
Nice.
after it flashes for a moment, like, the knights get up and like, this is a sign. We must go into the dark forest and find the Holy Grail. And so they all get up and they find their way to the forest. And when they get to the forest, King Arthur says to them, the only way this works is for each one of us to find the darkest, most dangerous spot of the dark forest and enter into that forest on our own. And I always think that that's such a beautiful way to look at your life, because it is scary to not know. It is scary to get to the door that's open for what you think may be a better life, and then to be like, I can't walk through it. It's not right for me. There's something wrong about this door. I got to go in over there. There's already been 12 people that went in there, and I don't know if I love being one of them. I want to be one of me. And so when you said that, it reminded me of that particular mythology, and I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up. That just hits a lot of different things that have been going through my head. And I've, one of the biggest things for me in kind of figuring out who I am, like maybe at a deeper character kind of level, like not just, on paper, on my resume, like what I do for work, but has been truth and authenticity, and for at least 5 years, I've tried super hard to live a principled life of living in authenticity, like living in truth. And I've been, taken to the coals for that, in particular, like I had the golden ticket to the PhD. I was in Washington, D.C., working for the University of Maryland and Children's National Hospital, and working on a combined $6 million research project. And, just working with all the experts in parent-child ADHD. And they knew all the people, had all the papers, had all the multi-million-dollar grants. But I was being so taken advantage of, and I knew it. And it was such a bad situation for me, and it was just getting worse. And it was so bad for my mental health. And I knew that the only way to step deeper into this was to take more of that. Like when I needed a pay raise, I was going to be kept at the same salary. It was 42 grand a year, but in Washington, D.C. So my rent was like $1,000 a month for this tiny little bedroom in a bad part of town. I didn't have a car. The only thing that, gave me reprieve from my horrible job was the climbing gym. And it was like, all right, well, the only way I'm going to be able to afford to live and like save $100 a month and like pay like $100 a month on my student loans is to, get rid of my climbing gym membership. I'm not going to be able to get haircuts as often. I'm going to have to eat bad quality food. And I knew I was just like already like being taken advantage of on multiple levels. I wasn't safe. I was treated like crap. I was treated like dirt. I was depressed because of what they put me through. And so I said, fuck y'all, basically. I in the most respectful way I could, because I put in a 5-week notice, which sucked. Like that was terrible. But I served out the 1-year contract that I signed, and I just said, I'm not going to sign another contract at the same salary, and there was an ethical dilemma. They were being unethical. I decided not to do any more recruiting because I didn't feel safe, and they were, violating this total ethical rule in research. I don't need to get into all the specifics, but I could. But the point being, I said, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. This isn't right. And my boss called me and said, I've never had a research assistant in 17 years tell me that they weren't going to do something. And they were like, well, you signed up to do this job. I'm like, yeah, but this isn't right. And so I left, and I went to my hometown of Hot Springs, Arkansas. I, was living in a cabin. I had a job dealing cards at a casino for a while, which was terrible. Like I don't support the casino industry, and I was working 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. shifts. Um, like I was a great blackjack dealer, and they wanted to groom me to be, like a supervisor, but it was just like, man, it was a terrible job, a terrible industry. So I left that, and then I was unemployed. I was working on my parents' farm, doing roofing jobs and like repairing my mom's fence for chump change and living for free in their cabin. And I was like 25 years old, and I was like, this isn't everybody's low point, but this is my low point. And I felt totally stuck. And I felt like I just reached this point in my life where I was between a rock and a hard place with, no path forward. And I just remember just being like, what the hell do I do now? And thankfully this master's program came up. I'm 5 months out from graduating from it now. That took me here to Fort Collins, Colorado, and then all the doors opened for me to start doing work with psychedelics, which I'd wanted to do for so long, and now I'm doing professionally, which is super cool. But I prioritized myself at that point, and I prioritized my passion, which is psychedelics, which is still stigmatized in clinical psychology a lot. Like people are kind of chipping their way in at the edges, but it's like you got to play by the rule book, and you got to just barely just chip your way in if you want to get in. But to me, that wasn't authentic. I was like, no, I'm passionate about psychedelics. Like I want to do this work. I'm gonna do this work, and I think that kept me out. And so I guess I thought that my authenticity would lead me where I need to go. But the mistake I made was expecting that I knew where I needed to go. Like I was like, okay, well, I'll be authentic. I'll study psychedelics. I won't put up with the crap. I'll just be myself, and expecting that to land me in a PhD program because I thought that that's what I wanted. And then when that didn't happen, then I'm just like here. I have to trust that that's in my long-term best interest. But that's a super scary, uncertain place for me, and it's hard for me, excuse me, to even make these like business decisions to say like I want to start a podcast, I want to invest in some equipment that I need, I want to carve out a chunk of time like to do all these things to say this is where I'm going, because then I start to put this label back on and this thing, and I'm just trying to like sit here and just be like, well, I don't know. And that's super hard for me. It's super, super scary, super uncomfortable. And it's forcing me to like also deepen my spiritual practice, which I need right now. Like meditation's been big lately. I'm journaling more. Like what I'm really getting into right now is breath work and really using the power of the breath. And just being able to use that to calm my anxiety, to sit in the present moment, to take myself out of my head, to recognize when I'm spiraling, and then just take a big inhale and just sigh it out through the mouth. It's just so calming, So anyway, that was a long rant, but
that was beautiful.
An important one, I think.
I agreed. I think it takes us back to the language of experience, and I think that when we look at the world of psychedelics and we look at the world of clinical trials and PhDs and all the red tape that's involved in those, there's plenty of awesome people doing awesome work that have taken the pathway of the PhD, and they've written amazing papers. You and I both read them, and we know awesome people that are trying to help out there. But it seems to me that a lot of the breakthroughs come from unconventional ways of trying to understand problems. And sometimes the conventional way is with blinders on. Hey, you can't think about that. Hey, we don't want you to talk about this. Hey, we don't want to have that. But sometimes it is these things that that end up being a breakout. And like, let me give you an example. I'm just spitballing here, but in the world of clinical trials of and this is just me talking. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a podcaster and someone who really is passionate about psychedelics and people and behavior. And this is just something I was thinking about. It seems that in the world of psychedelics, the people that would benefit most from it are the people that are kept out of the trials, people that have bipolar, people that have schizophrenia. I recently read an article that spoke about different mechanisms of actions and creativity and how structured thought or how people that don't have structured thought may benefit most from psychedelics. And after reading this beautiful study, I'm like, gosh, man, it seems to me that this particular substance, these psychedelics, this plant medicine, these entheogens may be really beneficial to people that have schizophrenia, may be really beneficial to some of these people, not all of them, but some of them. And we're excluding these people from the trials so that this particular substance can be passed. Like, maybe it's working with these people in the future, but that's just an example of how the path that's traveled the most sometimes excludes the people that need to be on it. You know what I mean? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hitting another heartstring for me right now as I'm in a hard place right now with the particular clinical trial I work on because I've had to exclude so many people, and it's just getting to me. And there was one day, a month or two ago, and I called a guy, and he was just like really suicidal, like really having a hard time, broke down crying on the phone. But he wasn't a good fit. And I said, let's try to get you in here for some ketamine because ketamine's really good for suicidality. And I tried to set that up. And it was just like overwhelming to me. I was actually the same day doing another like emergent kind of emergency ketamine for suicidality session that like got sprung on me that day. So I get off the call with this guy. The next call I call this guy. He just sounds real depressed. He's like, yeah, like, okay, like, uh-huh. And then I get to this question. I'm like, are you on any medications? And he's like, yeah, I have stage 4 cancer, just going to be honest with you. And I'm just like, damn it. I'm like, and it made me so sad, It's like, that's such a tragedy. You can tell it's just even hard for him to say it out loud. And then, so that was just a heavy day. And then since then, I've screen failed maybe 30, 40 people, talking on the phone with all these people. It's just one thing after another that excludes them. And then the other day, I get on a call and it's this old lady and she's calling on behalf of her husband. And I'm like, I don't even think you can do that. Like, and she just sounds real depressed and he's old. And she's like, well, he's got stage 4 cancer. And I'm just like, oh yeah, well, that'd be exclusionary. Like, I just got so removed from the human process of like hearing that information that it just became like a job like anything else, like telling anybody else, that excludes you. And then I got off the phone and I went to leave and I just like had this sinking feeling, like in my stomach. I just felt like sick almost. I wanted to sit down. I was supposed to go to the gym. I didn't know if I could go to the gym. I didn't know why. And then I thought about it later and I'm like, I think just blocking that out, just like trying not to let that affect me emotionally, it just like spun up something inside of me. But yeah, man, there's so many people that I'm having to tell, like, no, you're not a good fit. And, I understand the FDA's perspective of their like, right. I hate to say they're letting us because, they have power over us and they shouldn't, but they're letting us do an LSD clinical trial. And I see that like we're moving the needle forward in the right direction. But, there is a real lack of research, and this is the first like LSD study in the US in like 50 years. And so they're putting up every wall that they can, every protection, so that we can get the safety data, so that we can see if it works, so that we can learn, like at the earliest stages, like, is this safe? But at the same time, I see so many people that are suffering acutely that need help. And, right now in Colorado with Proposition 122's passing, I understand that all of these different drugs are going to be available, to where, you can do them freely, and there is protections in place for people to sit for, like, you on the medicine. Like, you're allowed to take your own medicine.
Right.
You're allowed to make it, to give it away. And kind of separately, you can charge somebody, or you can pay somebody to sit for you, which makes it accessible a little bit sooner than having to go through all the red tape of Colorado's Department of Regulatory Agencies, figuring out the licensing process and how to make healing centers and all the rules. So I feel optimistic about, at least being able to give psilocybin to people, maybe some DMT, ibogaine, mescaline, probably just psilocybin. You can't step on the federal toes,
Right.
Or they're going to crack down on you, because there's no protection from getting in federal trouble. Like, they're probably not going to come after anybody, but, like, if they decided to, they could. I mean, I have had to go through an FDA audit, and it was grueling. I've sat there and I've talked with DA agents. I've gotten, I've been in the process of getting a DEA Schedule 1 license for this LSD trial, and it's all, fun and games and, a mystery. And the FDA, the DEA, they seem like these entities out there until an agent is in front of you and you realize, they're a representative of this institution, and it's their job, primarily the DEA's job to stop diversion. They don't want drugs outside of where the drugs are supposed to go. And the FDA's job, to approve or disapprove drugs. But anyway, point being, I think we're moving in the right direction. It's so hard with LSD because it's so stigmatized, and we have to be careful. But it breaks my heart, really, to see us turning people away that need help. So I'm having to, like, take some time for myself. Meanwhile, there's so much financial pressure to enroll. We're on a short timeline. I don't make money if this isn't happening. The company doesn't make money. The shareholders don't make money. And whether or not that's how psychedelics should be done, I don't know. I have my own personal opinions, I guess. But it's hard to hold those two opposite ends of, like, this is what we need to get these things into our society the way that we've done it, and knowing the way that we've done our society is so flawed in so many ways. And then also, like, these are the people that need help. Like, we need to open these doors. I don't know if, like, this is the right business model. I don't know if this is the right way to do psychedelics, but, like, I guess I can talk about it, and hopefully that changes people's minds, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's really well put, Cole. I think that you summed up the way so many people feel, and to be on the front lines and have the actual stories of talking to people that, you can feel their pain through the phone and realize this person really needs some help. But unfortunately, I can't imagine the feeling it must be to thoroughly understand what someone needs and not be able to give it to them. But I, I'm so thankful you're the person that's doing it. You're such a passionate and caring person, and I think that on behalf of all the community, man, I want to say thank you for all of us. I'm sure there's tons of people that want to say thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. It's an awesome thing, and if the work that's happening eventually opens up the doors to the people that need it, then I got to think it's worth it.
Yeah, thank you. That really means a lot.
Mhm.
I needed to hear it because, like I said, it's been really discouraging. Um, there's all types of leaderboards, and this person's
Mm,
killing it. And it's like we as a site, like I'm not the only one. There's
right,
like 20
right.
different sites, and we as a site, because we're not a primary research clinic, we're still trying to figure that out. Like, are we researchers? Are we doing this? But we've been running the MAPS clinical trials for 6 years, and MindMed needed a site, so we came on board. But it's like we started at the end of the race, and now we're still at the end of the race, and it's not a good feeling. And when we're like, look, this person's killing it, they're in the front, it's like, oh man, well, we're out here trying, and I'm having to let these people down. And then it's like, if it's not going, then I have to submit a report every week that said, like, this person didn't show, this person didn't show. We had 3 people cancel appointments last week, and so I'm just kind of sitting around twiddling my thumbs waiting for people. And then it's like the next person that I call on the phone, I'll ask them all these questions, and then I don't know if they're going to be a good fit. So just at this particular time, it's not really encouraging, but it's helpful to be reminded that this is changing the paradigm slowly, and that the work is important. And I kind of lose sight of the bigger picture sometimes when I'm just in the mundane kind of minutia of working on it.
Yeah. If I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about like a hypothetical clinical trial. So this is obviously not anything that
Okay.
you're doing, but just I was speaking with a very interesting young woman the other day who was a an audio artist, and by that I mean she works in film and television and like in video games, and she has gone to school to be a professional to understand the way in which the waves bounce off the walls and refraction and all this kind of stuff. And it got me thinking a lot about your poetry and integration in clinical trials. And I'm wondering, to what degree do we use sound in psychedelic clinical trials? It seems to me it would be a great way to use sound as an anchor for people that have anxiety or that may have these other things, because we all know that after the afterglow kind of begins to fade a little bit, the well-being may get a little tingy or rusty. But it seems to me that, you know, the playlist, the poem, the sound that's used during the clinical trial may be somewhat of an anchor people could call on when the anxiety began to show itself again. Is there a way to measure that, or does any of that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah, lots of other thoughts. I guess the first one is my partner, Shannon Darling. She is really good about using different tools and integration. And that's, mainly right now just in our ketamine groups. It's
Hmm.
not really as part of a clinical trial. I mean, I guess you could kind of call it research because we're collecting data and analyzing it and trying to publish on it. But, she tries to expand the integration outside of just talking
Yeah.
to, like, let's get some movement going, let's listen to the playlist that was playing while we were on ketamine. Let's go for a walk, do like a walking meditation, draw, we can talk together, you can write, you can journal and do like exercises. So, there's a lot of different tools for integration that I think we should be using outside of just verbal processing, kind of what I think you're tapping into there. And then, yeah, the other thing is it's very important to have intentional music. Um, and thankfully, a lot of the folks that I work with at Wholeness Center, like one of my friends, shout out ST Frequency, Stephen Thomas is a
Yeah.
DJ. And you can go, if you type in PRATI, PRATI, in Spotify, there's a lot of really good ketamine playlists, and they're tailored to different like different routes of administration. So if you're doing oral ketamine, it has a slower onset and kind of a lower peak and kind of tapers off. So the oral, playlist goes slower. Intramuscular, it's like being shot off of a rocket and it like falls off. So anyway, these are designed specifically with the route of administration in mind. A lot of people try to avoid talking in the songs, try to avoid familiar songs because you don't want it to spark you to a certain place or a certain memory. But the music kind of guides you through the journey. And we have a playlist for the LSD study that's like 12 hours long. I haven't listened to all of it, and it's had some mixed reviews. But one of the discussions that we've had at Wholeness Center is like trying to understand the role of music in psychedelic therapy. It's just, like we're talking about poetry and sound, like these things, they kind of exist in a different space than like what is easily measured.
Right.
Which
right.
isn't to say that you can't do research in creative, innovative ways, or you can't find ways to measure these things. I understand the kind of mindset you have to get into to like rip out all the variables except for one. And really isolate the independent variable and see what role it's having on everything else. And with music, it's challenging to me because it's like ambient music, chill step, like beats per minute, like words in the music or not. Like how do you, like what are you manipulating there? Like what's the type of playlist you want? And I think part of the challenge is we're figuring out so much of the basics right now in psychedelics, like do they work or not? Like, do you need music or not? Like, do you need eye shades or not? Inside or outside? Like, two therapists or no therapists, or do they have to be a therapist at all? Like, we're still getting such the sort of, I don't know, low resolution image that in my mind, like, some of the music is more high resolution stuff. Like, can we really understand enough to where we can start tweaking these minor things and see the role of that to where we really kind of get down to where there's a really clear picture of like what's the right music or noise or sound, things like that. And that's exciting, but I think there's a lot of groundwork that still needs to be laid down to like kind of get into that, because otherwise, I mean, it's hard enough trying to look at a psychedelic experience, which is so subjective, and figure out, what the hell's going on there. But to get into those finer details, I mean, it's exciting to try to figure that out. But, hopefully we can get there.
That brings up, I read a recent study too that is being funded, and I think there's quite a bit of money going into it, especially from some government grants. It may have been Johns Hopkins. I don't know that for sure, but I'll just say there's a study that I read, and they were talking about trying to take the subjective results from psychedelics out of it. And the example they gave is like, say you could anesthetize somebody and then give them the psychedelic, then would they be able to have the same beneficial responses, long-term well-being, getting over certain mood disorders without having the difficult, change of consciousness? And that just seems odd to me. Have you heard about these studies?
Yeah, there's one in particular. I think it's UNC Chapel Hill, and there's a guy there named Brian Roth, and he's a big fancy researcher. There was a $26 million grant, I think through DARPA.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to figure out. It's basically psychedelics without the psychedelic experience, and their logic is that not everybody is going to want to go through the experience. Like some people aren't going to be a good fit. Like these things are helpful, but like maybe, like if we can get the benefits, maybe if it's all, at the sub-perceptual neurological level, then we can get, those benefits, help all these people without having to go through like a psychedelic experience, which can be challenging or, a bad fit. Now, it's difficult for me because like we need the answer to that question. We need to find out if you do have to have the psychedelic experience. I mean, for me, like in my mind, having had so many psychedelic experiences, like you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
You can't, like the psychedelic is the experience itself. Like maybe there's changes happening at the neurological, biological, genetic level at the same time that you're having the psychedelic experience, but it's thought, it's experience, it's emotion, everything is changing. It's, the nature of reality changes. To me, the most fascinating and mysterious thing about psychedelics is that it's not just that like the way that I look at something changes, it's the way that the external world acts is different in relationship to me. Like it's not just like number one, number two at the optometrist, and it's like now I'm seeing number two. It's like I'm in a different doctor's office all of a sudden, and like now like the doctor is like asking me weird questions and prodding me, and like I thought I was at the optometrist this whole time, but like it lifts up the veil, and it seems like the way that the external world interacts with me is different, not just me interacting with the external world, which is incredibly mysterious. But I think that you like the magic and what happens there, you can't just throw it away. And that that taps into the broader thing of Christianity and science. Are they incompatible? Can you throw away Christianity entirely? Can you throw away religion? Can you throw away spiritual experience? Like no. Like I think you can use the tools of hypothesis testing. You can use high tech methodologies to try to study and understand something that's unknown and mysterious. But once you like try to get rid of like all the unknown and the mysterious and say that this is just a material thing that we can manipulate, and like this is just like neural circuitry rewiring, like I just don't think that's the case. Understanding science, I understand that maybe that is the case, that I could be wrong, that we all have to challenge ourselves and our assumptions and say, like maybe these things are just occurring at a neurological level, which is why we need the answer to the $26 million question. Like, so I'm not going to say, hey, don't do that study. I'm going to say, I don't think that's going to work. But, if somebody's willing to pay $26 million to find out and like y'all want to do it, like I'm excited to see the results. But I don't think it's going to work out.
Yeah, I was really well said. I'm of the same belief, and I guess I would change it a little bit. I think it does work when they prove that it doesn't work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't think you can separate. I'm a big why person. Like I always find myself come back like why, like why is there this constant need to try to separate the spiritual from the science? Like I think it's the spiritual part that makes us human, and we spend so much time and money trying to prove that we're not. Like it's almost like it seems like there must be an ulterior motive to me. Like I don't understand why that there's so much money being poured into that, and I'm excited to see the results, but it just seems like people are really pushing really hard to try and get the benefits without doing the work. And I think that, like you said, there's something beautiful about seeing the way in which reality changes around you. Like that is such a profound experience. And
Yeah.
that's where, like, I think that that is where the neural circuitry changes is you have to be, you have to experience it to learn it. And that's the same with education. It's the same with someone pioneering a new field in wellness versus someone who got a PhD and learned from somebody else. Like you can go and learn from other people, but you're just learning someone else's experience. The real magic is in creating your own experience. And like that brings us back to creativity and the way we interact with the world. And yeah, when I read that study, I felt the same way you did. I'm happy that people are studying it. I'm happy that there's money for that. But I just wish that maybe more of some of that $26 million could have gone to help out the people that you would talk to on the phone
Yeah.
versus anesthetizing some people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from, the collective ego of, the rational mind, the
Mm-hmm.
scientific revolution, and
Yep.
kind of realizing how much power comes with this technology and these tools to understand the world, and that this scientific revolution has opened the world in such a this vast way that we can do so much more. Like we've cured so much illness, like
Yeah.
we've taken away like a lot of uncomfortability, like we have air conditioning, like food insecurity is relatively not that much of a problem in the US as it is in developing countries. So we can eat, we can cure a lot of diseases, we can stay in a comfortable climate, like we can interact with people all over the world in real time via our cell phones. We've done these massive, amazing things, but I think people just conflate that with like the human ego, the human mind's ability to overcome and just like anything else in the world, that like we are the pinnacle of humanity. But then you disregard the rest of the universe, like at the macro level, at the micro level, like you get tied up in this ego of like we know and we understand, and so like there's no room left for mystery. Like
Yeah.
even when I was 12 years old, I got asked for the first time, if I'm an atheist. I never thought about it. I was raised Christian. And I said, like, I guess I'm agnostic because it seems like you can't know one way or the other. Um, and, I'm more Christian leaning now. I believe in God now. I don't know exactly what happens after death, but, just the idea that you can know for sure one way or the other, it's just like I don't think you can. And so I think it's this materialistic, gosh, Dan Groff has a great word for it, Newtonian. He calls it the Newtonian Cartesian paradigm. Like this worldview. Yeah, it's great. Oh man, I'm reading this book Beyond the Brain by Stan Groff, and it's complex and super deep, and he gets into quantum physics, and a lot of it's over my head. But he talks a lot about this, and that like we exist in this Newtonian Cartesian paradigm where we think that we just understand everything in front of us. And I've never felt that way. I felt like there's a mysterious world, and that's so alluring to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like even like alien experiences, super fascinating to me. There's so many great mysteries. That's what's always motivated me towards science. That's what's pushed me towards wanting to understand psychedelics. It's like, hey, this is a great mystery and something that we don't understand. And like, let's figure it out. But like, it seems so sterile of humanity to just wipe all that away and say, well, we don't know, so we can't know. And I get like the idea of like, we filled in the unknown with so much crap, like witch trials and things like that. Like, you go back and there's so many quirks and oddities that arise out of like people filling in the unknown with belief systems that aren't accurate, that don't reflect reality. but I think you just have to be able to discern, like, what can we know? Like, what do these tools tell us? Versus, like, this is still a mystery. This is still an unknown question. And we can't just, exit out and say, well, like, surely there's no spiritual reality. Surely there's nothing superhuman or like crazy or mysterious or something that defies the laws of physics going on here. But at the micro level, like at the most micro level, it's super confusing. Like the Newtonian physics don't jive with the quantum mechanics. And so we don't know what the hell is going on anyway. So, I don't know. That's my main philosophy in life, I think.
It's awesome. I think this is what excites me about the time we live in. It seems for maybe since the almost industrial revolution, like we have been trying, a lot of people have been trying to pry us away from the idea of the spirituality. But I think it's brought us full circle, especially right now. I think psychedelics has a way of integrating the two. And I think that they work well hand in hand, like science and spirituality. As much as they've been pulled apart, I think that they're pointing towards each other. It's almost like God and man, it's like that. It's like the Michelangelo picture. It's like, yeah, we need both sides of them, because the spirituality is that divine inspiration that gives us that the spark to do the science. And I'm hopeful that in the future we'll continue to see the growing together of the two. And I know that may not sound, to a group of people, that may sound silly, but I really believe the two inspire each other. It's almost like the yin and the yang symbol, like they push each other forward. And I feel like we're at a beautiful point right now where we're seeing the reemergence of psychedelic. Like we're seeing a lot of different spiritual retreats where people are going back and they are reevaluating some scriptures. They're reevaluating some events that happened, and they're giving them a new sort of shine that can really help people. And to the point of the ego and science helping us move forward to get rid of food insecurity and help us live in places that are healthier. In some ways, it seems to me that for every avenue that or every obstacle we seem to get over with science, it's almost like we create a new one over here that we're not thinking about. It seems like there are these new mental illnesses that are popping up because we're living a life that maybe isn't as holistic. But yeah, I love it. I'm so stoked to get to talk to you, Cole, and I really admire the insight. I'm so thankful that you're out doing what you're doing, and I'm inspired by you taking the road less traveled. And so if you ever find yourself questioning, like, is that the right, should I have taken that golden road? The answer is no. You're doing the right thing right now, because I'm inspired. People listening to this are inspired. And that is where the new path is being blazed. And I'm so thankful that you're doing it. We have a few questions right here. I know that maybe there may be some things you may not be able to answer. And if you can't answer, that's fine. But I wanted to just put up some of these things here. First off, huge shout out to Hank Foley. Hank Foley's such an amazing guy. I love this guy. Everybody, if you're on LinkedIn and you don't know Hank Foley, you should get to know him, because he's an amazing individual.
Yeah.
So awesome. Here's what we got here. Yes, it's this is more of the question here. What is the FDA approved or FDA approval pending study using LSD? Can you give the name, organization, and application references? Are you able to do something like that?
Yeah, it is. The technical name of the trial is it's coined MMed-008. And it is essentially LSD for generalized anxiety disorder. The proprietary name of the drug is MM120. So that is lysergic acid diethylamide D-tartrate. And so this is essentially a salt form of LSD rather than the freebase form, which is kind of the water soluble solution that you see on the street, maybe in a little glass vial, or gets dropped on some blotter paper or sweet tarts, or in my case, one time a corn tortilla. It's a funny story. It's a true story. But anyway, so yeah. Gosh, I'll have to send you, George, the full name of the trial and the link to the clinicaltrials.org website.
Okay.
So it's not just in Colorado, it is across the US. So there's about 20 sites, as I mentioned earlier. The sponsor is Mind Medicine Incorporated. They essentially pay the money, they manage the high level business stuff, they wrote the protocol. And we, as a site at Wholeness Center, we're site 11-21. We basically take the protocol that they gave us and we execute the study according to how they've told us to do it. And we work directly with kind of a middleman organization. Typically in clinical research, it's called a clinical research organization, or CRO. So the CRO kind of mediates the relationship between us as one of 20 sites and the sponsor, Mind Medicine or MindMed. And the trial itself is MMed-008 using MM120 for the treatment of generalized anxiety disorder. And it's not FDA approved. This is a phase 2B study in human subjects. We're looking at 200 individuals and 4 different dosages of MM120 and a placebo. So this is a dose-finding study. If it goes well, we'll go into phase 3, and then you submit a new drug application to the FDA to get MM120 approved for generalized anxiety disorder.
That sounds promising. I'm like I said, I'm excited that the work is being done out there, especially if it opens up the doors to the people that really need it and may not be able to afford it at this point in time. So it's such amazing work. What else do we got here?
Good question from Hank.
Yeah, he's got another one. This one you may have touched on a little bit, but what is supposed to be the source of the actual substance?
Yeah, so we have a manufacturer, I believe it's Caligor Coughlin Pharmaceuticals, based in Texas. And so, this is pretty much public info. So we essentially get these little bottles with 8 capsules in them, and each capsule can either be 25 micrograms of LSD. Actually, I think it's 25 micrograms freebase equivalent. I'm going to get too much into the details here, but or placebo. So you can have a 25 microgram dose, 50, 100, or 200. So if you think about it, like if one of those capsules out of 8 is 25 micrograms and the other 7 are placebo, and you take all 8, then you only get a 25 microgram dose, or maybe half are placebo, half are 25 microgram freebase equivalent pills. You take all of them, then you have a 100 microgram dose. So essentially, we're blinded to the dose. The participants are blinded to the dose. All they get is a little bottle with a label on it with 8 capsules. We don't know what's in them. So yeah.
Let's see here. Hank wants to know the name of the lysergic acid diethylamide study sponsor again. Throwing that out there.
Yeah, Mind Medicine Incorporated. And the ticker, if you want to buy the stock, is MNMD.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah.
And let's see, what else does he have here? Is this a continuation of that one, or a separate study?
There was a study done using LSD for anxiety, I believe in Switzerland. Peter Gasser and Michelle Lechty, I want to say. I don't know exactly. I believe they're scientific advisors for MindMed. I don't think that study itself was sponsored by MindMed, but I could be wrong. But yeah, that's all I'll say on that one.
Nice. And I know it's not an FDA approved drug, but is the trial approved yet?
The trial is approved, yes. So the FDA approved it. The DEA gave us a Schedule 1 license. It's currently enrolling right now. So there have been patients dosed. We're trying to find people right now at our site.
And you know what? Before we land the plane, Cole, is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you would like to cover?
No, not in particular. It's funny. I think when you asked me to be on the show again, you asked me to talk about the relationship between poetry and psychedelics,
Yeah.
and I was like, man, I don't know. I don't know what the relationship is. And I don't know if these two things are tied in my mind, even. It's just kind of always been this mode of self expression, maybe, or just something to, something to do, something to keep me sane and expressive outlet. And then I have like psychedelics as a life thing, as a career thing. But I think we answered that question in a lot of ways, and we got to dive into the nitty gritty. Um, this definitely helped me kind of like see kind of where I'm steering this ship. I'm really glad I just got to kind of reflect on what's going on in my life, on like kind of just have some reinforcement on where I'm at in the study and where I'm going, and like just a validation of taking the road less traveled. So,
Totally.
it's scary for me even like to be on a podcast and not have I'm Cole Butler PhD. I always thought that I need to get the PhD so people will listen to what I have to say. And on LinkedIn I've just been saying what I have to say anyway. And I'm like low level in the field of psychedelic research, in the field of clinical trials. Like this is like one of the lowest level positions that I work in. So I'm like, why does anybody ever care? But I just speak my mind. And it's just kind of shocking to me that people are even interested in that. It's really fascinating, but it can be scary to be like, hey, like, I don't know what I am. And to come on this podcast and say, look, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I am. I don't know how to label myself. I don't know what I'm behind. I got this little business, kind of like this is what I do for work. But to be able to come on here and just say, I don't know, like, let's figure it out. Um, that's really cool. So just, knowing that I can still have cool things to say and stuff to talk about and not really have a clear vision of like who I am or where I'm going, but we've just been letting this process unfold naturally. And that's the essence of the poetry right there.
That is poetry right there. And I I think it's beautiful, and I think labels, as beneficial as they can be to express who you are, and we both know some PhDs that are mind blowing and have written amazing books, and they have done amazing things and started nonprofits and foundations. But sometimes that label can be just as detrimental to you as it is a benefit to you. And
Mm-hmm.
I I think that it is your authenticity that makes you an incredible person to talk to. It is this sort of, you know, this original thinking that you do specifically that allows you to be different than everybody. And I think that that's also what allows you to influence people. And when I had originally spoken to you about the language between poetry and psychedelics, for me, the bridge is is the experience. I think both poetry and psychedelics present the individual with an experience, and it
Mm-hmm.
is only through, maybe not only, but it seems to me through poetry that you can find a way to express the psychedelic landscape to other people, because you can't, the words are fleeting, the language is fleeting, but it seems to me poetry allows someone to convey the landscape. And yeah, that's why I was so thankful that you got to read those poems. And that's why I wanted you to set them up with, hey, I thought of this poem when I was holding space. Hey, I thought of this poem when I was getting ready to have a daughter. And the psychedelic experience is poetry. This podcast has been poetry for me, to get to hear you having a child getting ready to be born, and to see your company born at the same time, and to see the original thoughts that you get to present us at the same time. I love it, Cole. I'm so thankful you're here. Before we land it, where can people find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
Yeah, I'm excited to read you one more poem.
Yeah, please do.
That I wrote 2 days ago that really captures, a lot of what we've been talking about, and, unpublished. So, man, I need to figure out how to publish stuff. I'm getting there. I bet I could, write through my notes and publish something small. So I'm excited to maybe do that. I think I will.
You could self-publish on Amazon, and
Oh, really? Okay.
I think that, and then you could you could go on to Amazon has KDP, which is like their own self-publishing. Once you've got the editor or whatever, you could self-edit it. Once you have the artwork, then you can release it, almost automatically. And there's all kinds of ways you could self-publish now. I would buy that book, and I think that there's tons of people that would buy your book. It's beautiful.
It'd be nice to have a product to sell.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. Well, you have all the work right there. All you have to do is kind of compile them, and then maybe you could work with. I think maybe you had said that your wife is into artwork. You guys could probably put up some pictures like Carl Jung's Red Book. You know what I mean? Like even make it like a manuscript or something. Like that would be epic, man.
It would be epic. Okay, nice. Thank you for the suggestions. I'm gonna start looking into that. Okay, this poem is called "We're Here Now?" ? Left adrift in wayward winds, I don't understand the position I'm in. Played the part, yet played the fool. How was I to know the truth? Trying to beat the game of life, rolling a pair of zero-sided dice. When will I know how to tell the future? Perhaps the answer is that it's futile. Futile to attempt such vain nonsense. Rather, indeed, I must accept. Permanent uncertainty, cosmic confusions, causing contusions of brain matter. What's left? A mystery.
That's beautiful. Like I can see myself in a ton of it right there, which is the hallmark of a beautiful poem.
Thank you. I'm glad it resonates.
Yeah. If people that are listening to this, they want to go and read these poems right now, are some of these up on your website?
Yeah, there's 6 of them are up on my website. There's some of the kind of psychedelic related ones. Like I said, I kind of put them together as a package. Like these are ketamine poems. So anyway, if you go to lionheartwellness.net /poetry, there's a link to the PRATI website, and there's 6 published poems there. And hopefully, I can get a book together, go to my website, buy the book. That'd be super cool. That'd be exciting. So I need to start putting some of them together.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in this community that are that would be willing to help you do it. When we get offline, I'll we could talk more about it. I think you totally can, Cole. I really admire what you're doing, and I think it shows through in your poetry. And it's weird how life works. Maybe you end up taking the route of the poet on top of the route of the psychedelic, investigator and things like that. Who knows what challenges are out there if you're willing to take a chance, if you're willing to remain authentic. I think the world rewards you in ways that you can't even imagine.
Yeah. And if anybody out there listening has some thoughts on publishing, feel free to reach out. I'm Cole Butler on LinkedIn. colionheart@gmail.com is my business email. So I'd be down to get that going, and I appreciate the encouragement, George, and having me on. So it's been super awesome.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. We'll put the links in the show notes. Reach out to Cole. Thank you for taking part. Hank, thank you for commenting.
Thanks,
Everybody
Hank.
in the chat, thank you so much for participating. We love you. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. That's all we got for today. Aloha.